Today, Road to GH will revealing Nina stood silently, gazing out the window of her crimson office as the soft afternoon light bathed the city skyline. Her reflection on the glass showed more than just a tired face. It revealed the weight of solitude she had carried for far too long. Since her divorce from Sonny, everything in her life had shifted. What was supposed to be a fresh start only led to deeper heartache. Her brief fling with Drew was nothing more than a fleeting spark, a desperate attempt to feel something again. It hadn't healed her. If anything, it had reminded her just how broken she still was. Each time she encountered Willow, a wave of regret and sorrow would sweep through her. Despite her efforts to connect, to seek forgiveness, and to prove her love, Nina remained on the outside, unwelcome and untrusted. The daughter she had once dreamed of knowing was now a symbol of all that had gone wrong. Their bond, fragile and unfamiliar, seemed further out of reach with each passing day. And while she had once believed that love could conquer pain, she now wondered if she was capable of loving again, or if her heart had simply closed itself off out of self-preservation. Yet, even in her darkest moments, the longing remained. Nina wanted to be held, to be understood, not as the editor-in-chief of a fashion magazine or the complicated woman linked to scandals, but simply as Nina. She imagined, in her loneliest hours, a different kind of relationship, one where she didn't have to fight for affection or beg for acceptance. Perhaps one of the men who had once passed through her life still carried feelings for her. Perhaps someone new, waiting in the wings, saw past her flaws and believed in her worth. Whatever the future held, Nina knew she wasn't ready to give up on love. Even if the path forward was uncertain, and even if her heart bore the scars of betrayal and loss, she still believed that somewhere, someone was willing to walk beside her, not to save her, but to remind her that she was never truly alone. Martin had long been a figure of quiet reliability in Nina's life, never one to seek the spotlight, but always stepping forward when she needed solid ground beneath her feet. Known for his measured voice and old-school charm, Martin had remained a bachelor longer than most expected. Yet he never seemed particularly lonely. He carried a certain wisdom that came from surviving his own share of disappointments, and beneath his affable, southern mannerisms, there was a depth to him that not many had taken the time to uncover. But Nina had. Or at least, she had seen glimpses of it during some of the most fragile moments of her life. Their connection had been forged not through flirtation or mutual attraction, but in crisis, when Nina was battling to be seen as a mother by Willow. When the world seemed to be closing in on her from all directions. It was Martin who had stood beside her in court, not only fighting for her rights as a parent, but also reminding her, gently but firmly, that she was worthy of being loved, forgiven, and understood. While others judged Nina for her past mistakes, Martin never did. His counsel wasn't just legal, it was emotional, thoughtful, even kind. That compassion left a mark on Nina, even if she didn't acknowledge it at the time. Though the show had hinted at a potential romance between Martin and Tracy, their scenes often leaned more toward banter and playful bickering than romantic chemistry. It was the type of relationship that brought levity, but not necessarily intimacy. Tracy, for all her sharp wit and storied history, remained a force of her own, unlikely to ever settle fully into the soft spaces that Nina now longed for. Martin's interactions with her had been entertaining, even charming, but they never hinted at the kind of emotional vulnerability that Nina craved. With Tracy, Martin played a part. With Nina, he was simply himself. As Martin returns to Port Charles from his latest travels, there's a growing sense that he might be ready for something more grounded, something meaningful. His solitude has run its course, and perhaps now he's looking not just to advise others on their personal struggles, but to step into something genuine for himself. Nina, too, is at a crossroads. Her world has been turned upside down again. Her relationships are strained, her heart is worn thin, and trust has become a luxury she can rarely afford. But Martin is different. He's seen her worst moments, and yet he never turned away. If their story is to evolve, it won't follow the typical soap opera blueprint. There will be no grand seductions or declarations under moonlight. Instead, it will begin in small, meaningful gestures. Martin dropping by Crimson just to check in. Nina pouring an extra cup of coffee without being asked. The two of them talking late into the evening, not about cases or custody battles, but about dreams unfulfilled and wounds that still ache. Over time, those moments may stitch something delicate and true between them, something that doesn't ask Nina to pretend, to compete, or to prove herself. There's something poetic in the idea of Nina finding love not in the arms of a powerful mogul or a dangerous ex, but in the steady presence of a man who's always seen her clearly. Martin may not be the obvious choice, but he might be the right one. In a life marked by chaos, lies, and betrayal, Nina could finally discover a love that is quiet, honest, and healing. And perhaps, without even realizing it, she has already begun to let him in. There was a time when Nina believed that Rick could be the answer to her longing, a complex man with his own tarnished past, yet capable of understanding the kind of darkness she had lived through. Their history had been brief, impulsive, and ultimately destructive, but it had also been real in ways that few of her relationships ever were. Rick hadn't seen her as a project or a problem to fix. He saw her as a woman worth fighting for, even if his methods, back then, were as flawed as the man himself. Years had passed since their paths diverged, each walking a road littered with personal failures and half-hearted redemptions. Yet in Port Charles, the past never truly dies. It lingers, reshapes, and waits for the right moment to resurface. Nina, now scarred by heartbreak and betrayal, finds herself more guarded than ever. But that doesn't mean she's immune to curiosity, especially when it comes to those who once stirred her soul. And Rick, despite everything, remains one of the few men who truly saw behind the curated mask she wore for the world. Rumors of Rick's renewed presence, and more notably, his clandestine involvement with Ava, create a stir that Nina can't ignore. The very idea feels like betrayal brewing in slow motion. Nina and Ava had fought hard to reach a place of mutual respect after years of conflict, mistrust, and secrets. They were no longer rivals or enemies, but women who had survived too much to throw away a fragile friendship. And yet, if Rick were to re-enter Nina's life, the lines between friendship and desire could blur dangerously fast. Rick has always walked a morally ambiguous line. He was never the hero in anyone's story, least of all his own. But that complexity is what once drew Nina to him, and it could do so again. She's never been one to chase safety in love. What she seeks is connection, fire, and the kind of intimacy that comes not from perfection, but from shared brokenness. With Rick, that still exists. A spark buried beneath the ashes, waiting for the right moment to ignite. However, the cost could be devastating. Ava is no stranger to vengeance. And if she suspects that Nina is betraying their newfound bond, the fallout could be nuclear. The quiet stability Nina has been trying to rebuild might crumble under the weight of old temptations and new secrets. And Rick, ever the wild card, may not be worth the collateral damage he brings. But when has Nina ever backed away from something simply because it was complicated? A love triangle involving Rick, Nina, and Ava wouldn't just disrupt the surface of their lives, it would unravel everything they've worked so hard to mend. Friendships would fracture, trust would erode, and the past would come roaring back with a vengeance. Yet for Nina, the question would remain, is the chance to feel truly alive, even for a moment, worth losing everything she's built? In a city where every love comes with a price, Nina may once again be tempted to gamble her heart on the man who once nearly destroyed it. And this time, the stakes might be higher than ever. Nina had always gravitated toward danger cloaked in charm, and Jen Sidwell fit that pattern with unnerving precision. He wasn't merely a bad boy, he was a storm in a tailored suit. Unpredictable yet magnetic, the kind of man who could dismantle a room with a whisper and leave everyone wondering whether they'd just survived a disaster or witnessed brilliance. His arrogance bordered on intoxicating, and despite the warning signs, there was something about him that demanded attention. Nina, With her taste for emotional complexity and her history of falling for men who kept her heart on edge, might find herself drawn to Sidwell in a way she wouldn't fully understand until it was too late. Sidwell, for his part, was no stranger to control. A commanding presence in business and personal matters, he exuded power without needing to shout it. He had the wealth, the influence, and the scars of a past riddled with questionable decisions and women who had loved him despite, or because of, those very flaws. His obsession with his ex-wife, Natalia, was no secret. But it was also unfinished business more than burning passion. And that left a space wide open for someone like Nina to slip through the cracks and capture his attention. Where others saw Sidwell's manipulative tendencies as red flags, Nina might see reflections of her own past mistakes, her own capacity for emotional sabotage, for pushing people away even as she longed to be loved. They were, in many ways, two sides of the same coin. Both wounded, both complicated, and both dangerously charismatic. In Sidwell, Nina could find a kindred spirit, someone who didn't flinch at intensity, who could challenge her sharp tongue with one of his own, and who understood the seductive pull of chaos. Their chemistry wouldn't come softly. It would arrive in the form of tension-laced conversations behind closed doors at Crimson, glances that held more threat than promise, and unexpected moments of tenderness beneath their armor. Sidwell might begin the connection with mere curiosity, distracted from Natalia by the spark in Nina's eyes and the edge in her voice. But soon enough, it would become something else entirely, a game neither of them could control. For Nina, the temptation would be as much about escape as desire. Sidwell represented a detour from the pain of the past year, a man so wrapped up in his own web of intrigue that he wouldn't demand anything from her, at least not at first. But as their paths entangle further, the danger becomes not just emotional, but strategic. Sidwell's world isn't clean, and getting close to him might put Nina in the crosshairs of enemies she never asked for. Still, there's no denying the allure. In a world where so many of her relationships have been rooted in disappointment and betrayal, Sidwell offers something raw, unpredictable, and undeniably electric. Whether it would end in disaster or redemption remains to be seen. But for a woman who spent far too long trying to color within the lines, falling into Sidwell's orbit might be exactly the kind of beautiful mistake Nina is ready to make. There was a time when Nina believed that her love with Sonny could withstand anything: lies, betrayal, even the looming shadows of his criminal empire. Their romance had once been a beacon in the chaos of Port Charles, a rare moment of peace and passion that made her feel seen, chosen, and protected. With Sonny, she wasn't just Nina the editor or the misunderstood mother. She was someone worthy of fierce love. But that dream shattered the moment truth came crashing down. When Sonny turned his back on her after learning she was the one who exposed Carly and Drew to the SEC. The pain of that abandonment still echoed in Nina's heart. Sonny hadn't just walked away, he had dismissed her, written her off like a mistake he regretted making. And while she had always known he was a man of volatile loyalty, the coldness of his departure left scars she struggled to heal. She had watched him pivot to others, most notably Ava, with an ease that made her question if what they shared had ever truly meant something. And yet, no matter how much she tried to move on, part of her still looked back, aching for the man who once made her feel whole. Now, with time slowly softening the edges of their shared past, the question lingers. Could there be a second chance for them? Sonny remains a dangerous man, both emotionally and literally. His unpredictability, his capacity to love deeply and destroy just as fiercely, is what draws Nina and terrifies her in equal measure. But Nina is no longer the woman who once begged for validation. She's stronger, wiser, and perhaps more capable now of meeting Sonny on equal footing, not as a woman desperate to be loved, but as someone who dares to choose love again, despite the risk. A reunion with Sonny would not be smooth. It would come with judgment from everyone in town, especially those who still believe Nina is the villain of the SEC scandal. Carly would rage. Ava would scheme. And Willow, already keeping Nina at arm's length, might sever their fragile bond completely. But for Nina, the idea of reclaiming something so deeply personal might outweigh the consequences. If Sonny, in his quieter moments, finds himself reflecting on what he lost when he pushed her away, if he begins to remember the softness of their shared mornings or the way Nina once anchored him when his world spun out, then the door might open. And when it does, it won't be through grand gestures or declarations. It will be in a look held too long, a conversation that feels too familiar, and a moment of honesty that strips away everything but the truth, that despite everything, they still matter to each other. For fans of #Team Cena, such a reunion would feel like fate correcting its course. But for Nina, it would be more than just a romantic rekindling, it would be a reclaiming of her own narrative. To love Sonny again would be dangerous. But to love him on her own terms, without apology or illusion, might be the most powerful choice she's ever made. As Nina finds herself standing in one of the most emotionally charged moments of her life, the question of who she should share her future with looms larger than ever. Her heart has endured betrayal, isolation, and longing, yet it still beats with a quiet hope that love, real love, is still out there. Each potential romantic path offers something strikingly different, a new beginning, a return to the past, or a dangerous dance with desire. The choice won't be easy, and for fans watching closely, it's not just about who Nina ends up with, it's about who she becomes along the way. Martin represents everything Nina has never had in a relationship: stability, emotional intelligence, and sincere, quiet loyalty. He's the kind of man who sees through the noise and recognizes the woman beneath the surface. Their connection has always been based on respect and trust, qualities that Nina desperately needs after the storm that was her romance with Sonny. A relationship with Martin wouldn't be driven by adrenaline or high-stakes betrayal, but by small, meaningful gestures and moments of vulnerability. He wouldn't ask Nina to perform or prove herself, he'd simply accept her. For a woman who's always had to fight to be seen, Martin might be the safest and most healing choice. On the opposite end of the spectrum lies Jen Sidwell, a man who, by all accounts, should be kept at a distance. Yet, he embodies the very danger Nina has always been attracted to. With his power, unpredictability, and undeniable charisma, Sidwell presents the possibility of a passion that consumes rather than comforts. He is not a savior, he is a risk. But for Nina, who has often been drawn to the fire even when it burns, Sidwell might be exactly the kind of beautiful chaos she finds impossible to resist. With him, Nina would never be bored, but she might lose herself again in the process. Could she tame the storm inside Sidwell without reigniting her own? Then there's Rick, an old name with a long, complicated history. He wasn't perfect. In fact, he caused a great deal of pain. But there was once love between them, buried under missteps and manipulation. Rick has a way of creeping back into the narrative when least expected, and with his newfound involvement with Ava, the stakes are even higher. Should Nina allow herself to reopen a door she fought so hard to close? Could she truly forgive the past, or would old wounds inevitably reopen? A reunion with Rick could be thrilling, but it could also unravel the fragile peace she's worked so hard to maintain with Ava, potentially destroying one of the few meaningful friendships she has left. And then, of course, there's Sonny, the one man who changed everything. Their love was deep, complicated, and passionate, a whirlwind that made Nina believe in something greater than herself. But it ended in betrayal, and Sonny made a choice that shattered her heart. Still, love like that doesn't just disappear. It's carved into the soul, and sometimes, despite everything, it lingers. If Nina and Sonny were to find their way back to each other, it would be a story of second chances and painful redemption. But it would also test the limits of what forgiveness can truly look like. Would he see her differently now? Would she? Nina stands at a pivotal turning point, not just romantically, but personally. Each man offers a different mirror to her past, present, and future. Will she seek peace? Passion? Closure? Or will she choose herself and step away from love altogether to rebuild her life on her own terms first? Now it's your turn. Who do you want to see Nina with? Is it Martin, the man who offers safety and sincerity? Sidwell, the unpredictable enigma? Rick, the ghost of old passions? Or Sonny, the man who once held her heart? Drop your thoughts and predictions in the comments below. And don't forget, General Hospital airs daily on ABC, delivering all the twists, betrayals, and surprises that keep Port Charles pulsing. Stay tuned right here for all the latest spoilers, storyline breakdowns, and behind-the-scenes buzz about Nina and the unforgettable drama surrounding her journey to love.